Recording in progress.
So, welcome everybody to Freedom Lovers Canada. And we have a very good topic this evening. And one of our participants regularly, Laura Hamilton. As usual, we're going to start off with our theme song, O Canada, which was written and recorded by my dearly departed brother Michael Benyakar, who was also a freedom fighter. And we'll just bop along until the song ends, and we have a few more people joining at the same time, the few latecomers. And if you're not already a member of Freedom Lovers Canada, you can join by going to the website freedomloverscanada.com, and there will be posted on that website all of the previous meetings that we've had with a lot of interesting speakers and also a lot of other resources. So please feel free to go to the website freedomloverscanada.com. If you'd like to email me anything that you'd like to share on our newsletter, which goes out every week, you can email it to freedomloverscanada@gmail.com. And my name is Rena Malkah, and I've been hosting Freedom Lovers Canada for almost 3 years now, trying to make more people aware of what's going on in the world and educate people and hopefully make a change. Anyways, here we go. Oh, Canada. Oh, Canada. Well, I'm glad that you're all here with us this evening. And, feel free to put your comments in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what part of Canada or the US. We have, American people who also join us. Our situation is basically global, anyways. But, the US is in our same time zone. And if you'd like to get our newsletter, Please, again, join the Freedom Lovers Canada through the website, freedomloverscanada.com. And the newsletter has a lot of interesting information. It has the recording of the previous meeting and information on upcoming meetings, as well as any interesting rallies or science and political matters, lawsuits. So a lot of interesting information. And when you do get the newsletter, please feel free to share it with other people. So look, we have Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Parry Sound, and Toronto, and this is great. Where else are people from? Please put your name in the chat. It's great to see people from everywhere. Hello from Alberta. Elena is from Toronto. So it's great to build a community and, be with like-minded people. We have a lot of pressure, and knowing all these things is sometimes a burden, and also maybe you've lost, friends and loved ones who thought, you were crazy or a conspiracy theorist, which I'm proud to be. Feel free to share and join us, and also put any questions you have in the chat or raise your hand. I'm sure Laura would love to answer your questions. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Laura now. Please unmute yourself, Laura, and introduce yourself. She's written a book. I think she's working on another book. She's written a course, and she's a beautiful woman. And we look forward to what she has to say. She's also a wordsmith. Very interesting how she relates different words together. Go ahead, Laura, and take the floor.
Thank you, Rena. I am so excited to be here with everyone, and we're still getting the reverb like last week, Rena.
Yes, I have to put myself on mute. There we go.
Yeah. It's such a shame, and I don't know how to get that remedied, but I will at least know when you're ready to say something. So that'll be convenient. And if others also have contributions, questions, comments as we go along, I would very much appreciate hearing. So please do raise your hand to just let me know. I will be looking at the gallery, except for when I have the presentation. So if I'm able to share my screen, I will do so, because I did actually put together a presentation to make it easier for you to follow along.
You can share it now. I've allowed you to share. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, it's pretty handy to know when you unmute yourself there, Rena. You get the reverb immediately. Okay, here we go. So I don't also want this to be a super, I want it to be about the presentation, but I also really more so want it to be about us. So I just want to preface that and say, The Real Story of Rome is book 2 and the title of it, which is actually the reality of my empowerment, not mine specifically, but mine when we stay as the first person in our story. So I thought to summarize tonight, I would break down an introduction and overview to what we're actually going to cover. And as Rena said, I do like to play with words in creative and playful ways, just so that we start to see the spells that are literally spelt out in the spelling of these words. So the fundamental difference between being real and keeping it real, which is an acronym for relatable, ethical, altruistic, and loving, that I coined as the figurehead telling the tale. So I say that as well because then we see the two sides of a coin. And just to go back to the spells that are constantly being cast with our words and the ways that we use them. The basic framework on which culture is based, and the witch connection. So as Rena said about being called crazy, that is not new to me, as I'll speak to just only briefly without going into much detail, because I did detail it more in my book, Fully Committed, The Sacred Sojourn of Now. Victim consciousness and the flip side, not the side as a suffix, which I will break down as well, and the deity of creation and all its creatures. So many have heard about the term person and monster, and then, or under person, I think it is in Black's Law Dictionary, you get sea monster, and then it's the C rather than the SEA. So I just wanted to bring in creatures because many are familiar with that reference, and then break it back down to the God tree, essentially, and the grantor of domain versus the grantor of dominion that many have spoke to, but we'll get into that later. And what is a mixed war? Because it really matters. We've all been told that, World War III is coming, or we're aware we're already in it, but were we aware that we're in a mixed war and that it is actually between the public and private that is already being fought? The unreal battle of principalities. This is the piece we've all been warned it's a battle of principalities. Well, when we actually start to understand the offices and the first, second, and third person pronouns, their usage, and then how that actually relates to who is in the principal office, then we start to better understand the battle of principalities from a corporate nature, and then how that translates to the spiritual nature and side of things too. A brief his story, which is the play on his history, of the isms, which are suffixes that get added onto the things themselves that got us into this corrupted mess, and the powerhouse that will end it all, which, just to bring it in as the ending that is the beginning, it's you. And when I point to you, there's three fingers pointing back at me too. Because when I stand as the powerhouse in my life, and you stand as the powerhouse in your life, we don't have to give our power to another house, which would devour us within theirs. So, why me? Just for context, because many people like to know who's actually before them. I have an honors English degree from McMaster in 2009, and I am a certified and founding member of the John Maxwell team, which is a certification program for coaches, teachers, and speakers from 2011. I was heavily involved in that program until 2017. I dated one of the faculty members who was actually the coach instructor. So I had a really high level view of behind the scenes in the program, as well as after we broke up, where my life was in England for 3.5 years. I then sold the program for 1.5 years. So I am grateful for all of the training that experience helped me gain access to, because I got a preview into the world of secularism before I even had any understanding that essentially is the business world's religion. Now, the soul realignment practitioner training I took while I was over in England, and it was an online-based program that I took many trainings through, and it's basically accessing the Akashic records. If anyone's familiar, it's the energetic database that contains all soul's choices since the beginning of time for what is time, but all happening now except for in our minds. So a lot of ideas that I now have gained access to through my studies and my lived experience, I appreciate the training that I had with the soul realignment practitioner training, because it introduced me to the concept of what an entity is, which is simply a thought form that accrues energy when we give it ours. So going back to the idea of a powerhouse and us each being the powerhouse, we're powerful until we give our power elsewhere and then feel powerless because some of our power is being directed into another house. And that's what we're going to get into. Because as I mentioned in the meetup group, if you noticed, I had wrote about Caesar itself, which is a title that was applied to Julius, who came from the tribe or gens of Julius or of Julian. And I say this because if we actually look at the title of Caesar phonetically and how it sounds, then we see that he was the Caesar of things, of which we became, because we were then incorporated into his house. So as mentioned, I am a published author. I published it in 2022. I started writing it in 2017. And I have a chapter in there about starting for the wrong reasons, because it was my ego that was largely driving the ship in terms of why I started writing it and why I pressed on with writing it. And then also because I do feel compelled to write. It's just part of my soul's composition. And I did channel the idea for Peaceful Inner Warriors United, which I have a group on Telegram as well as on Facebook. You're welcome to join. And peaceful is actually an acronym, if you're interested, that I break down in Fully Committed, as well as inner, which I'll say is individual needs necessitate emotional resilience, resonance, and respect. And respect actually came to me last while I was working on the book in 2022, after having got locked up in 2019 under the Mental Health Act, when my ego made a crazy call to the police to report the system is corrupt, and the police were in on it. But there must be some good ones there, and I'm here to help bring peace to this world, so take me to your leaders. And then I found out about what I refer to as the modern day witch hunt legalized and normalized. And basically, it took 2.5 years of unpacking that traumatizing experience of being locked away for 2.5 weeks, while seeing the energetic patterns that were at play underneath of what I got locked into through the system, which was a mind bender for certain. And also there is a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that if I hadn't been through that experience, there's no way I would have stood the way that I did during what I refer to as the certificate of VEX, identity death, AI experiment or PSYOP. And I say VEX because if anyone has done anything litigious and used a common law argument, there is a possibility that the status of an OPCA litigant was tried to be applied to you, which would have been a conversion, as we'll get into, as it was tried on me. And that means that you're organized, you're following someone else. Pseudo-legal, so you're kind of using legalese, which is the language of the court system, but not entirely because it's pseudo. And then it's commercial because then we're automatically incorporated into the warring waters of admiralty, maritime, and merchant law. And then organized pseudo-legal commercial argument, because if you're arguing, you're already agreeing to be at war. And then a litigant is another status. So I say that because we've all been vexed, which means to cause frustration, irritation, or annoyance. And the OPCA litigant status is applied to those also deemed vexatious litigants, which is why the term vex is so significant in my books to what's going on here, and why I brought it into the title of how all of our identities prior to 2020, when hindsight became 2020, all of our identities died prior to then, and then our life as it would be and has been began at that time. So that's my context for why I call COVID-19 the certificate of X, identity death, AI, A being the one, and then 9 being the I, or A and I, 1 and 9. So I tuned into the significance of the Justinian deception, which if you haven't looked that one up, Romley Stewart and Rowan Lorian have incredible information about that I highly recommend having a peek into. Though I will say in the creator or the hierarchy of creation concept that he lays down, Romley Stewart, he refers to God as the grantor of dominion. And I believe what is more accurate to say is that it's the grantor of domain. Because if you actually put an @ sign into dominion, you get domination, and domination is how domains are claimed. And then you see the main character in the domain, and then you see it's about doing rather than being. And so there are all of these word plays that might take a rewind or a rewatch of the replay in order to catch, but I lay it down as simply as I can, and also say that because of what I went through with the Mental Health Act in 2019, in 2021, I got a summons for having spoke at a rally during the lockdowns, and I was one of 8 who received a summons 2.5 weeks later, delivered by a man acting as a police officer, who told me he had paperwork to deliver or issue, which is the truth. And also where we start to see that the man delivering the paperwork was holding a public office that made him seem to be an officer, when it's important for us to dispel that spell, to say he is a man that steps into the office to serve paperwork sometimes or administrate paperwork, but he is always in his private capacity, who may choose to step into the public, but remains in his private capacity. And this is where we actually end the mixed war, when we start to understand that distinction as clearly as I'm hopefully laying it out. And then, as Rena mentioned, I am working on my second book, which will be called The Real Story of Rome. And I am going to be including some of what we will be talking about tonight, and obviously much more. And then I also say that it is a conversation that we would all be served well to be part of, because each of us have keys. Because in the scheme of things, there's a lot of talk about being awoke. And what I just would like to frame today at the start of all of this, which I guess is not so much the start because it's already been 20 minutes, but awake, if we actually think about it from the perspective of the field of consciousness that we are all part of and contributing to. Awake is actually what comes from the waves that come out when there is a drop or a penny drops in the consciousness that then ripples out and becomes the wake, which is how when one of us wakes, then there is a wake that is created that can rattle the cages of others, which is why those of us who do wake up to the truth then can cause a ripple and a tide to those that don't want to be disturbed, because their vessels were doing just fine until you started rocking their boat. So with that being said, I'm going to ask you, which craft are we talking about? Because I believe that was the question that was asked to those who got persecuted in the past. Which craft are you specialized in? Which craft have your eyes been specialed in? Is it law? Is it medicine? Is it education, philosophy, theosophy? What is your craft? I believe that was the question that was asked to those who were accused of being witches. And we see the descansos, where life as it was before the question was asked stopped. And then a new identity was taken on when the woman or man was deemed a witch. And then that was their identity moving forward after that. Descansos is a term that Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about in a fantastic book, which you can also listen to as an audiobook, called Women Who Run with the Wolves. Highly recommend checking that out if you've not heard of it before or listened to it for a while. She talks about the descansos as the crosses along the road that you know somebody's life stopped there. And so I translate that to where life stopped with the identity we had prior to, and then the identity that became ours after the transition point of a trauma, a wound, or a change in identity. And I thought this was a really cool picture or image that I found when I was looking for something else, but not naturally. It's hard now, and then it gets easy later. Or it may seem easy up front, and then it gets hard after. And John Maxwell, the namesake of the coaching certification program that I'm certified through, he would always say, we always pay. It's just you pay interest up front, and then you enjoy the rewards, or you pay up front and you enjoy the interest, or you play up front and you pay the interest. So I just brought that in. And then also the question, what is the fundamental difference between being real and keeping it real? If anyone has an idea about what that distinction is, or if you've ever noticed the difference, I'd love to hear any feedback. Or I see that there have been some questions, so I do want to give you an opportunity to contribute and then also plug in, and then we're going to get into another layer of this. Does anyone have an idea the difference between keeping it real and being real? Have you ever thought about the distinction? Julie, please. Julie, please.
Oh, hi. Hi,
Hey.
Laura. Thank you so much thank you so much for your talk so far. It's just amazing, so informative. Um, so I would think keeping it being real is finding your authentic sovereign self, and keeping it real is maybe like keeping up with the Joneses, like when you put your mask on and you're keeping it real, maybe.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and it might be a bit of a trick question. And you're absolutely, yeah, masks, which mask are you wearing? And then have we ever thought about how we've been conditioned to call each other guys? And then did we ever see the GYI or the GUYS versus the GUISE for the guys, which is the mask? And then it's like, hey guys, well, which
Yeah.
mask are we wearing? So
I relate to that. Yeah, I'm always like, it's a guise. Like, yeah, absolutely. Are we under a guise? Like, whose guise is it?
yes,
Whose whose delusion are we tapped into? Right?
yes, Julie, thank you so much for stepping up and being brave enough to share your perspective, because that really is what it's all about. And so oftentimes we think that it's when, somebody's being the speaker of the night or speaker on the stage, but really it's what we do in the day to day when we show up to the meeting. That is a huge celebration for us to really be reclaiming our power and then to actually put our hand up and dare to actually contribute something. So I commend you for being the first to do so tonight, Julie, and I hope that others will follow Julie's lead. So thank you. And I'll also make the correlation with Julie and the Julian gens, which is the tribe of Julian that Julius came from, who was the original too. So of this plan that we.
I've always resonated with Julius Caesar and all of that as a Julie myself, I feel, and Jules, which is energy. So energy follows the path of least resistance, and yeah, I like to think of myself as a jewel.
Love
And a
it.
jewel, what does the earth produce but precious jewels? We are all precious jewels. We are.
Yes. And actually, before the end of this, I will share a series of a man named Ken that has an amazing series with Gemstone University on my Telegram group. I have been sharing it this week, a new series that I just recently discovered. But yeah, thank you for bringing in the Jewel connection, because the Gemstone University group, I'm really looking to connect with Ken because he's got some amazing information. So I will jump back to the presentation, and I really appreciate you for stepping up, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, so the fundamental difference between being real and keeping it real. What I didn't specify before I asked the question, which is why it was a bit of a trick, is because the upper casing of keeping it real is actually to say it's keeping it relatable, ethical, altruistic, and loving. Did you notice? This is the distinction that when we don't notice that words have been capitalized, then we don't see that capitis diminutio maxima, media, and minima have actually been brought into the fore. So capitis diminutio. Oh, I think there's a U in there, but my apologies. Maxima is the maximal loss of status. Media is the middle range, which is why the social media and the communications of media is the middle range, because these are the influencers in the middle that just change our mind instead of our status officially, because it's all about the mental programming. And then minima is simply like the transaction of when a woman gets married and then oh, it says wapatus. My apology. That's supposed to be capitis, but I can't multitask as well as what I was trying to. Um, anyway, when a woman gets married, what I found fascinating during my brother and his wife's wedding ceremony preparation and the rehearsal, it was actually said by the wedding planner that her father was to take her hand and physically put it into my brother's hand, because it was the exchange of chattel, which is what the woman is when she stops being the father's daughter to now being her husband's or her betrothed wife. So it's the change of status through title. So I thought that was really interesting, and the more that I've dove into all of this insanity, that experience of the exchange contextually made so much more sense to me. Now, the basic framework of culture, I break it down as cult you are, because ultimately, what is a cult but simply the community that we belong to, that we share the belief systems of. Now, hegemony is when one dominant culture or group holds influence over the social, cultural, ideological, or economic influence exerted by an assumed authority over others by de facto right of claim, which I say is the de factory is a good way to remember it, because de facto has the factory, where then we're going back to the factory to process someone else's information. So that's a nice way to remember de facto versus de jure, which is of the day. And so these are the types of government, but I'm still not certain that even the de jure government fully exists. And I also am not the expert on that. So this is where I am missing keys and need them from those that have these pieces that I'm missing. And I may have some that you hadn't thought of before. And this is how together we impact the whole, because we come together and unify. And then we can actually be the counter hegemony or the counterculture, which is an attempt to critique or dismantle hegemonic power by challenging, confronting, and opposing existing status quo and its legitimacy in politics and all public offices that influence identity. Now, I did take these two definitions directly from Leveling the Playing Field, Ode to Laura Lees, which I'm going to show a little section of in the next slide, or in a couple slides from here. But from my book, I pulled the definitions from page 213 of quo as something received or given for something else, and status as position or rank in relation to others. So I just felt like it was important to break down all of these words that we're so used to throwing around as just status quo, you know how it is, and just, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. And then if we actually break it down, then we see that quo means one thing and status means another, and together they mean something else entirely too. So belief systems, I created an acronym around systems. I'm pretty acronym heavy because it's an easy way to remember complex ideas. And belief systems are designed to save you significant time, energy, money, and stress, was what that was supposed to say. But I was moving fast, and the questions we ask direct the ions onto a quest to find the answers, which when asking questions, we then can stand as king, because when you are asking, you're directing, and then someone else has to answer to you. So the question to ask is, who is the you that is being saved time, energy, money, and stress? Now, a story I wanted to quickly share about the witch connection and differing interpretations of the same word actually stems from when I was locked up. And at the time, I realized that there was an energetic vampirism element to the mental health system, because that is how the system operates, where the powerhouses of us then are put into a position of trust with authority figures who need us to take on the status of patients in order for us to comply and stay along the lines of those who are tasked with orders to fulfill in order to keep their position. And at the time, I had my own ideas about what witching or what witches were. And I've never pursued witchcraft or anything of that nature. So I have never studied any of that. But I always had a suspicion that because of my out there ideas, I probably would have been called a witch or considered a witch and been burned at the stake or thrown into the water in order to see if I would sink or float and then get burned, or, you know, the fate of those deemed witches. And I just believe that the witches that were called that were ultimately empowered people that couldn't be controlled. And so it was easier to persecute them, which is where we're going next. And I made the mistake of calling another family member a witch because for me it was a term of endearment, and basically saying that she had the biggest heart and was always helping others, and it was taken to be a complete offense. And I didn't actually then talk to her for like 3 years to then clarify that I was actually offering a compliment, and she took it as a huge insult. And like, why would I have been so mean? And so all of these is just differing interpretations. And then actually in my course, I break down the distinction between an interpretation and interpolation. Interpolation actually being a term from which identities stem. So here I want to get to the victim triangle, because I believe we're at a time when we need to actually flip the victim triangle, or the dreaded drama triangle, which is often known as Cartman's drama triangle, into the empowered dynamic, which I say to be the empowered dynamic because I'd prefer for it to not just be of the mind, which is what we find when it's mental. But the dreaded drama triangle has the victim at the bottom, with the rescuer or the hero needing to save the victim from the persecutor or the punisher that's coming for them, and they can't clearly do it for themselves, so clearly they need a rescuer. And then you stay in this disempowered dynamic that's anxiety-based and problem-focused, because the victim always has to have a problem, and the rescuer doesn't have a role until there's someone to save from someone else. So this is why in the movies that we grew up with, like in Disney, for instance, the hero doesn't, the hero is often a drunkard that is everybody's just kind of not thinking much of until they have a quest to go on, and then finally they find their purpose. So that's the victim triangle. But what's interesting is that when the rescuer actually becomes a coach, not by sports definition, but by definition that my ex in the coaching program that I'm certified through, he was a coaching purist, as he called himself, and would say that coaching is actually about using the Socratic method of asking questions that draw the answer out of the one that never thought to ask themselves the question, which meant they couldn't find the answer because the question had never been asked. So a coach, in its truest sense, is about actually holding the space for the one that has been a victim to find an answer that they didn't know they had within them, which is how the victim becomes the creator if we're willing to hold that space, which is why coaching is one of the fastest growing industries of modern day. And then where the persecutor and challenger are concerned, this is one of the biggest distinctions that I believe we need to really seriously consider and bring into the culture of care we have an opportunity to co-create together. Because when we persecute someone for having an idea, instead of challenging the one with an idea, that is a huge difference. And if we actually can separate the individual from the behavior that they're expressing, then we are able to really stand in our power and actually stop harming one another who may see behaviors that others are exhibiting that we don't have respect for. And yet we don't have to take the individual with the bad behaviors down because they have been exhibiting bad behaviors because in the model of the world that they were following, that was what worked for them. And we're all looking to do the best we can and provide for those that we love. So I offer that, and to say too that instead of choosing a side, we need to recognize that side as a suffix actually denotes a person or substance that kills, denoting an act of killing. So homicide, to kill another; genocide, to kill people; menticide is the systematic dumbing down of the populace; democide is the killing of citizens by the government that owns them, because the creator owns its creations and can do whatever it wishes to within a usufructory system, where we will be the ones that get fruct, which means to extract rich fruits from a source of which we are. So the dia tree and alleged living word. I actually am going to play a 2-minute presentation from Leveling the Playing Field, Ode to Laura Louise, which is based off a conversation I was having with Michael Seegers, who is a lovely man that I met when I was introduced to the teachings of Summit Lighthouse, which is also connected to the Church Universal and Triumphant, that I do not subscribe to and followed for a time because I was looking for answers and Michael alleged that he had them. And he is a very smart and convicted man. When we're convicted of our own beliefs, then we leave be the present in order to follow that, and can also call others to do the same. And so I had a conversation with him because I recorded 12 videos with him, interviewing him and trying to help him get the message he was promoting out. And I do not subscribe to the belief system or ideology. And I had my own challenging of his belief system, that alchemy is not a belief system in and of itself. And so I used the conversation that I had directly with him privately, that I did tell him I would be publishing, because he won't take my name, or he won't make a disclaimer that I don't support the teachings of Summit Lighthouse off of what has been used to promote that school of thought. And so to protect my own honor and to make clear that I was trying to get answers, I got the answers and I stepped away, but I can't change what is out publicly. I wanted to share that I don't believe it's fair to say that I am still following a school of thought that I'm not, because I can't change what was already done. And it's just a reflection of what we're all dealing with when we're dealing with the public realm. So I'm pulling this up, and it's only a 2-minute video, and I would love to hear what people will have to share from here. Oh, you're looking at, okay, so this is all the isms. This is the wrong screen. My apologies. Okay, let me, sorry. Does anyone have any questions at this point? It was tucked away down at the bottom, so I couldn't see it right away. I appreciate everybody's hanging in here, and I'm gonna read the comments while this is on.
Just feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So this is the Leveling the Playing Field course. And you can see that I've got 44 lessons over here. And this is the conversation with Michael, who is a lovely man. And this is where I present the dia tree, which I want to share with you. So here I have created my construct of the dia tree that breaks down God as an idea, and then is also connected to the figurehead of the coined idea, that in this instance receives the name of God, but is ultimately the figurehead for the house that all the ideology is under, which are surrounded by lords, which would be us, unless we externalize that, which the teachings of Summit Lighthouse and the quote-unquote ascended masters, they would fall more so into that realm, I would believe. But ultimately, the ideology is the study of the idea that is representative for the house. Ideological state apparatuses are all of the forms of culture and society, religion, politics, social media, sports, all of the ways that we stay in line based on the ideologies of the idea of the house. This is Louis Althusser's concept of the ISAs that then empower RSAs, which are the repressive state apparatuses I refer to be the enforcement branch or wing of the dietary, and that is the cops, courts, councils, and this is, by Roman standards, the villeins, who were upper class peasant class that were then told to go kick the ass of the one who disobeyed the liege lord, and then were ultimately victimized by the villain who was just following commands, and that's the corporate realm. Corporate entities, what's an entity but a thought form that accrues energy because we give it ours? We're the powerhouse until then we give the house our power, and that is where belief systems are formed based on ideas that have whole schools of thought formed around them that then create structures underneath of those that are fictitious in nature, but people agree to, such as the idea of a corporate ladder. We climb it when we're in it, but if we're not in it, then what are we climbing? And then in relation to all of what you shared around alchemy, when I said that it's a belief system and you said it's not a belief system, it's alchemy, I questioned that because ultimately it's an idea that has been coined with the name alchemy that you believe to be more credible because of your belief in it. And this is the challenging of the idea rather than persecution of the man with the ideas that you don't believe our belief systems. Yet I recall when we were creating the Michael and Laura show, you had said that your response to atheists would be when they say they don't believe in anything, you say that is a belief in and of itself. Is that not correct? All right. So his answer was that he didn't say that. That wasn't his question. It was someone else's question. But I did have that at 1.25 speed. I speed my things up. I realized I probably should have slowed it down to a normal speed because I talk fast generally. But I want to ask if anybody had any feedback to the dietary concept and if that made sense to you. For the big idea to be at the top, to have ideologies, which ology, when added to a word, means it's the study of the thing the word is connected to. Ideology meaning it's the study of the idea. And then Louis Althusser's theory of ISAs being ideological state apparatuses. That's your religion, sports, politics, government, education, family, community, all forms of bodies that influence and promote the big idea at the top of the house. That's what an ISA represents. And then the RSAs are the repressive state apparatus. They get their power from the ISAs of the government and all of the other forms of legislative body, the family, all of the ones that give power to the cops, courts, councils, and crown. They then reinforce what the ISAs that gave the RSAs power, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, with the corporations being the nation states underneath of those that are ultimately under a larger umbrella, which is why jurisdiction is actually best broke down in relation to the Russian doll theory. So if you think about us as the soul, that is the smallest Russian doll at the core of it all, core being French and heart. In French, core is heart. And so that core doll at the Russian doll's heart is us. And then outside of us is the counterfeit version of us, which is the soul corporate. So that's the SOLE instead of the SOUL. And the soul corporate then has larger corporate bodies outside of that. And so when we think about jurisdiction, you have the municipal government as the smaller government outside of the soul corporate body, which is representative of our person. And then you have the provincial government and the federal government. And then you have the one world order or the international government that has been being laid out with all of the insanity we've all been dealing with and subject to. and implied to be subjects of. So these are the Russian dolls. And I saw in the comments that Sheila McFarlane was referenced with Sheila.ca, and she is absolutely lovely. And what I've shared with her, who was going to come to a workshop I did actually in January, she paid and then had other obligations that conflicted and wasn't able to come, unfortunately. But what I've been trying to express to her and others who are using the POG primer is that if we are putting men and women on notice in their public capacity, it's kind of like chopping a head off of Medusa. Medusa has a whole bunch of snake heads, right? And if you chop one of the snake heads off, another snake head emerges. Why? Well, if you think about the offices as the snakes that Medusa has on her head or around her head, and then you chop one of these snakes off, and then the figurehead that we just chopped off, which is one of us doing the thing, then we destroy the man or woman and their credibility and their reputation and their ability to create a livelihood for themselves and their families. And then somebody else steps in and fills the office that they just got persecuted for. So the whole fuck Trudeau piece, like, yeah, I understand he's a man with really bad behaviors. And I say fuck with the fornicating under contract of the king. So you can say it that way, or fornicating under carnal knowledge. So I'm not just swearing, I'm using an acronym. But in the scheme of things, the man himself is filling an office. He's got duties to perform. He's been groomed for the role. There's a spiritual war that is far beyond what any of us have been alive for. And there are some who have been bred for the positions that they have taken. BS, belief systems, take it or leave it, challenge it, just don't persecute the messenger, because this is how we actually make the shift. We do it live, living as the word together. So I'll go back to my presentation if nobody has anything to say about the conversation that Michael and I had. Two sides of the same coin. Absolutely. This is the piece. I am coining an idea called the dietry that I just broke down for you with the conversation I had with Michael that I had created before I had the conversation with him. But if we think about the coin as having a heads and a tails, if I'm the figurehead telling the tale, then it would be my head on the coin. And because Julius Caesar was the Caesar of all things, because his head was at the top of his house, well, then Caesar, that's the biblical quote of render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. But this is the distinction that we're getting duped by, to think that Caesar was the highest or that God is the highest, because who's God? Or what is God? What is the energy that is then going to possess us? Because possession is 9/10 the law. Julie, you've got a question? Christine, I do not have a visual to share with you in this presentation, but next week I will have that. I've done the best I can. I'm also...
Excuse me, Julie, can you unmute yourself?
I just did.
Okay,
Sorry,
great.
you can finish.
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just going to say that I've been really busy with actually getting together. I'm helping to promote and am part of the Hub for Humankind, which is happening September 21st to 22nd in Blackstock. It's at Soul's Path Retreats, and I will actually be doing a workshop on Sunday, September 22nd, on the real story of Rome. So if you want to be present for that, there is a BOGO, so a buy one, get one half price deal going on until the end of today. So if you are interested, it's not aligned with the fact that this was the night of the presentation, that you can benefit from that offer. However, if you do it after today, then there's an Eventbrite link where you'll be able to use a code to get 20% off. And then, yeah, so I can send you that with Laura J. 20 is the code that you can use after today. But if you have a friend that you want to come to the Hub for Humankind with, then if you do it today, then you'll save one of the tickets at 50% off. And so,
Laura, can you put that information in the chat and also send a flyer or information to Freedom Lovers Canada so we can put it in our newsletter? Thanks.
yes. Thank you, Rena. And I did send it to you last week, and I'll do it again. And the link I just shared here. And so, Julie, if you've got your question.
Okay, so it made me think of the two sides of the coin as an Uberist, right? The snake that bites its own tail. We have a lot of reverberation, sorry.
There you go.
Thank you.
Perfect. It'll be better now.
Yeah. So what I was wondering, Laura, is what you think about, like, so I, as a yoga guide, I recognize that we have our inner divine God and our inner demons as well. Of course, we all have this. We can exist in our higher realms or our lower realms. It's who we give that energy to, right? The power to that. So I just wondered, like, as well, like in the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, how do you feel about law in the universal sense as like the law of how we weigh our heart on the scales of justice, and all of that? And you're one smart witch. That's also I had to say. I just love how you use words, Laura. It's amazing. It's amazing. So thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and also do not identify as a witch. However, I do accept the.
Of course you're not. No, I'm not saying.
I appreciate what you're saying, and then it's just more so just to kind of we throw it around because it is a compliment, and I take it as it's intended. So thank you for your kind words, and then it's also just to recognize how. Now, instead of doing the things that got me the title in the first place, now I'm implied to be the thing that all of those other things led to going underneath of one umbrella, which is called an archetype. So I just bring that in because that's essentially what a status or a title is. Sorry, Julie?
Absolutely. And we don't manipulate, like, so you don't want to be considered a witch who would use powers to be corrupted by that, right? So I can understand why we use that word carefully.
Yes. And Bobby Roundtree actually just said she calls herself a witch, and she's actually the born medium. She's out in BC, and we did 2 episodes on the connection between homelessness, psychic abilities, and mental health as well, that I think was a really, really powerful episode. And so we're going to do some more interviews, but Bobby is a really fantastic woman that I am seeing you either wanting to say something, Bobby, or
Can I finish one thing? My last little word on that. So what I was saying about how we get caught up between our higher realms and our lower realms, between the oppositions, right? And what the best thing we can do is to find your way to your heart-centered, unconditional love, your heart mind balanced between your ego and your empath, and that's. Thank you.
Yeah, and when I got locked up, I was very much having a natural experience of enlightenment without any drugs or any kind of substance. I was just super dialed in and aligned, and I hadn't smoked weed in over a month, so my system was clear, and I was vibrating at a super high level. And I was also in Arizona where there was a CIA FBI agent conference happening while I was there, which I do talk about in the book. So if you don't have a copy, I know that Dom had actually got it listed on Freedom Lovers Canada website as well. So it is there, and I do have copies.
I will pick that up. I'm going to read it, Laura, because I have to also tell you, when I was 24, so I'm 49 now. When I was 24, I also went through my first spiritual awakening. I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks as well. No smoking weed or anything, and takes you back to basics, like to your humble human being self. And it was awesome because I got to rebuild, like I had to, because that's what they make you go through to like get all of your things back, is rebuilding yourself and that. And so it's amazing how so many people that have spiritual awaken, that tap into the Akashic records and that collective consciousness, when we tap into those higher realms, and we can actually go into the one mind, the cloud, the data that's available to all of us when we do tap into that. It can make you feel insane a little bit until you realize that so many other people are having those experiences as well, albeit very individual and unique and very personal and beautiful, but very similar experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And at that time, I was literally talking about the fight between the fearful and faithful. And it was so real for me that I was literally seeing black, white, and gray colors outside of me, and talking about how the gray ones that try to stay neutral are most easily manipulated by the dark side, because the light have nothing to win or gain, because light is all there is. Except the Gemstone University series that I have been watching is absolutely profound, and I was going to go quest for that, and also the interview that Bobby and I did, because those two episodes are really powerful on the Peaceful Inner Warriors United channel. Bobby, if you maybe could find those and then post it into the chat, that would be really appreciated. Then people can hear your perspective. And I see Claudio Selvaggi is also here, IU to me, who is an amazing astrologer, and we've done some interviews as well. Claudio, if you wanted to find one of the ones that we've done and posted in there so people can gain access to some of your insights. We're actually collaborating on a new version of tarot that will actually bring in an astrological perspective to be able to bring in the luminaries from Claudio's vantage point, where he actually is tuning into the Egyptian walls and bringing in a lot of elements to a lot of pieces. And then I have a lot of other pieces. But I say this also, I love that Bobby loves that. But with that being said, when I went through my experience and I got locked up for it, I was very much the Fool, which is the first major arcana character that actually goes through the major arcana and then actually steps into all of those archetypes to be able to actually embody the energies of each of them. So I was very much in the Fool position of stepping over the cliff with the dog barking at the heels and not realizing what I was about to put myself through, when I got locked up under first a 3-day voluntary that wasn't voluntary, because I was denied the right to speak to a lawyer without a psychiatrist's permission, because I had been displaced from first person in my story to third, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing this information, and why I say I stood the way that I did when I got the summons that I spoke at the rally, only because I was divinely guided to go to when I woke up at 3 o'clock that morning and knew I needed to go to the rally and see if I could get on stage. And so I did, and then I got the result. And that then was really what called me back to life, because ultimately I knew that I wasn't going to be represented by someone who wasn't in it with me, having not had access to a lawyer without a psychiatrist's permission, who wasn't conveniently on duty to be able to give me that permission. And so my disempowerment was actually led to my empowerment, because I refused to put myself in that situation, and I was going to figure it out. And as a willful one, I magnetized what I needed to me, which was a man who has studied the private and helped people for the last 15, 20 years. And so when I got my summons and I asked someone, another man stepped forward and said, "Hey, do you want me to send you or connect you with the man that was going to help him?" And it's like, "Yes, please." And so then I went on to a really deep dive to be able to do what I did to get my charge stayed, which means that I am implied to have stayed at one of the 4 inns, I believe, because that's what a stay means from a legal perspective, I suspect. But obviously, I'm not part of the club, so I don't know for sure, because if you're not in the club, you don't know the signs, symbols, and omens to look for, because your eyes aren't specialized to the lies until you join the club, and then you get access, but then you can't share what you learned when you were part of the club because it was a secret club and you're not allowed to share it, or else you get dismembered or disbarred, and so it's not in your benefit or advantage to actually speak ill against the source of your wisdom or insight. So with that being said, Bobby, you're muted.
Honestly, my comment might seem like it was so long ago now, and I apologize. Okay, so I'm 53 years old, so I'm not quite sure, and I'm not going to use my age as an excuse, but it is a little bit. I'm not sure how to share those YouTube videos, but I do find it absolutely not ironic, not coincidental, but serendipitous that I actually shared those 2 videos, Claudio's video actually today. I hope that's okay, to a client of mine. Because I was I'm a medium, so I was divinely guided. And by the way, young lady, I love your cat. Your cat is awesome. Your cat has so much to say, and that is why your cat took over. That I thought that was so. Anyway, I
Who's
consider.
cat?
Oh, I'm not sure what this lady, Alina. Yeah, her cat was part of the thing, and trying to let us know that she was wiser than anyone here. No offense, Laura. I'm sorry. Anywho, so I'm not quite sure how to share it, but I absolutely back your mention of it because I was sharing it this morning at 5 a.m.
That's
BC.
awesome.
I'm on Vancouver Island.
That's amazing. And I know that Claudio would actually have a lot to say about the cat showing up, because he's the one that when I got a cat eye or a cat hair in my eye earlier in the week, he had lots to say because the cat is actually connected to Medusa, which was already mentioned earlier. So yeah, Claudio and I don't know whether Claudio, whether, I think it would probably be more appropriate to keep on with this presentation, and we can do a different presentation on that soon. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Bobby, while you're...
One more tiny little thing. My client yesterday showed up with Medusa hanging from her rearview mirror. And the story of Medusa is a victim story. She is a rape victim who was cursed with the snakes by Pallas Athena, so that and the ability to turn people to stone. And it's a very, very sad story that becomes an empowerment. So it's neat as heck that you use her as an example. And I will shush. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for your contribution. That's awesome. I would love to know which videos. If you text it to me, I could share it. However you sent it to her. If you send it to me the same medium, then I can put it in the chat, and that'll be easier for me. I will get back to the slideshow here and just say that Claudio and I definitely are going to be doing another call.
If I might just say, we have 20 minutes left. So and if you don't finish, that's fine too, because this is part 1, and we will be continuing with part 2 next week.
Yay! Thank you, Rena. Very much appreciated. And this literally is, when I was listening back to Michael and I's conversation right before the part that you did hear from it, which I will actually I will share these links so then you've got all of them. I'm just going to go there. And empowered storytelling, moving beyond the hero's journey, is the topic of the talk that I'm going to be doing at the Hub for Humankind on September 22nd. So I'm just going to pop all of those. Oh, it sends it as an image. All right. Well, I can do that later, but I thought it would be easier. Oh, it did it. Great. Okay, wonderful. So that's going to be my talk on the 22nd, Moving Beyond the Hero's Journey, which will tie in also with what Claudio and I are working on with the revamped version of tarot, which I have a theory that I call Hiro's Prism, or PRism for the public relations campaign. And then an ism is actually a really significant concept as well. But Hiro was a tyrant that Xenophon wrote about. And Xenophon had a father whose name sounds like gorilla from what I read about. And why that is significant is because he is the one that actually wrote Hiro the Tyrant, whose life was no better off than the peasants he oversaw and had to send villains to go harm, because that was how he kept his position. So I call it Hiro's PRism, and this is my theory that is connecting the X, Y, and Z that we'll get into. But Hiro also actually wrote Socrates' defense to the lawyer, or it was Socrates' apology to the jury. And so we're most familiar with Aristotle's version of it, I believe, or no, it was Plato. But this is the thing about all of the lineage within history, which is his story as we have come to know it to be, because Xenophon was one of the founding fathers who coined many things, including the generational warfare, which we're going to be getting into next week, which ties into the battle of principalities, because this is where we see domain, domination, dominion, and then domination or dominion with an @ sign in it, which is very much like the www.url of it's a free world, but it's not really actually, if we actually are in Hiro's Prism, which this I've been asking Claudio, because he works with an AI technology in order to create images, but he won't create anything that is not of the highest, because we are projectors. And so whatever we have in our mind, then we are creating. And so I was asking him to create a front face with a house of cards, and then to have this bottom space to be the chessboard, because that's where we're getting played when we are deemed to be the pawn, which is the legal person, statutory person, surrogate person, in alieni juris, which is where aliens actually come in, because under the control of another, as a ward, lunatic, minor, or infant, because then we're implied to be the debtor, executor, excubitor, or the exchequer, where we're the one that checks the X as the signature, which I call to be the sign at your own risk line, because then we're drawn into the public instead of able to remain in the private, which we can do through the common law that is uncapitalized, unspecified, and unlimited, until we allow a capital C or a capital L or a hyphen to change what we're actually dealing with. And then it's a different house of cards entirely. But Claudio, I haven't found a way to have him help me make this image just yet, but I have hope. So just seeding the idea. But this idea right here, actually, if we actually think of the X as the all that created all of us, I just ask, who does that not include? The all created all of us. All of us are included. Who's not included? Well, only our creations, of course. So this is where the royal we comes in, because we are a first person pronoun. Or so I, me, my, us, we, ours. Those are first person pronouns. When we're incorporated into the public office, the reason the Queen has the royal we is because she brings a whole office with her. because she's no longer acting independently. And this is where the royal we comes in, because now it looks the same, it sounds the same. I'm only just being posh to say that I'm the queen or she's the queen and start talking in these titles. But I'm just only playing with it because it's actually very serious, where we get incorporated into the public, and then there's a first, second, and third person office. The first person is the office of man, or the office of the principal, which is why I say it's the unreal battle of principalities. It's unrelatable, ethical, altruistic, and loving. Because that's what happens when we bring dog Latin in. Did anybody notice there was some dog Latin there? It's dogged text because it's more than one letter capitalized in an ungrammatically correct way, which means that now we're using a sign language that we didn't recognize because we haven't specialized until now. Now we notice that where there's more than two capitalized letters in a word, that's where it's dogged. I didn't mean to have my hand up, but my AI doesn't listen quite so well. I don't know how to put my hand down either. So anyway, we'll just carry on. So second office is actually where the artificial person, or sui juris, one's own right to represent the principal. So this is where the agent acts on behalf of the principal. So the principal is the proper or properia persona. And that's one who is able to speak for oneself. This is who the vassal, which is the holder of title, is. And allegedly, the Vatican became the vassal of Earth after 1666 with the Se Qui Trust Act. And that was also corresponds with the Great Fire of London, where the city Foursquare, which is now the financial district of London, that was where the fire actually started, in Pudding Lane. Don't you know, to take your treats or to eat your desserts? Well, that is because the Great Fire of London started in a bakery on Pudding Lane in what is now the city Foursquare, or the financial district of what is a sovereign state, which is within the city of London, except for it's called the City of London. So the is the article that specifies that the City of London is separate from the whole City of London. And this is a distinction that we need to be more aware of, or else it'll be what is, we'll gloss over it. So diglossotext is another term that Romley Stewart brings to the fore, because the diglossotext is how we gloss over something and we don't recognize that it's then changed, as is what the Joker text within.
You know what? I just want to say something because I speak Greek. So gloss comes from glossa, which means tongue.
Yeah, and it's the serpent's tongue. Yeah, there's more to it. I don't have it top of mind, but I very much appreciate that. And this is where we find that we all have keys because of where we've each been, and what we've seen, and what we've heard, and what we just heard in passing. But it's just like, wait a minute, now that you say that, I recall this. And then we can call things out instead of call out one another in the way that would persecute each other instead of call out a behavior. So making these distinctions, but this is a pretty complex idea, and it's because when I was locked up, I could only see these front three characters of the chess game, which is the king, the knight, and the pawn. And I said that if I was locked up and I wasn't able to, I couldn't play all the characters, but I was going to certainly play as a knight, which I thought the horse was the bishop. So in my book, I got the title wrong because I called it a bishop, but it's actually the knight. But then I realized that the knight is the front side and the bishop in chess is really the back side, which is the unseen side of the law for the land, air, and water that we don't recognize, because the rook or the tour is the castle. And so this is the domain that is claimed. And that is connected to the bishop, cavalier, or holy see, which is the three when we tune into the queen who turns the king's head, which I realized was actually in French, reine. And so that's why you pull the reins or the reins. And then that's also connected to Santa's reindeers and Rudolph having a red nose, which actually connects to a box that I got in my second summons after not having attended the first two hearings, which was a little blind man in a box that had a walking cane or a walking stick, and I didn't fully understand the shtick until I asked what the white cane was, because I had a color bias knowing that yellow is the receipt copy. So the original must have been white. So I saw the little man in a yellow box and I thought he was a white man with a white cane because I was thinking of the original. And that just represents a visually implied person. However, when it's a yellow cane, there's a red tip on the end, and that represents someone who's deaf and blind. Just FYI. Insane, which is why Rudolph has the red nose. And who knows where all of this goes, except to say that when I was talking to Michael before this section that I shared with you, I had asked, or I had challenged his belief system that he didn't believe was a belief system, which is a belief in and of itself. But he had said about the living word, which I was listening to right before coming to you tonight, and I realized that it was a great opportunity to bring in the alleged living word and to recognize that word is a concept in Anglo-Saxon culture, roughly corresponding to fate or personal destiny. And the word is ancestral to the modern English word for weird. And then it's also a verbal noun formed from the verb weirban, which looked to me like weapon, meaning to come to pass, to become, which I thought was interesting. But I also wanted to pose to you, as we look at the web of word, the matrix of date word as woven by the Nordic, or I can't do that any better than you can, the Nornin, as woven by the Nornin, the fate of the Norse legends, the emblem, 9 staves arranged in an angular grid, consists of all the shapes of the runes. So this actually is all of the runes, which are another divination tool that many use. But the web of weird, or the web of word, is significant, I believe, because in the scheme of things, anyone that tries to say that the living word is not us, I don't believe is factually true, because anything that has been written can only be amended after it has been shared or published or finalized, because the final eyes have looked at the lies or the truth so far as what we know it to be, and then that becomes something we can only amend or make additions to. But it is dead once done, which challenge me on it if you wish to. But what I pose is that we are the living word. Us who are here, us who are alive to actually be the hosts for the ghost's gnosis, gnosis being the spiritual world or the spiritual word or path that is recommended. That always needs a host for its gnosis to allow the ghost to come through us, which connects to the Holy Spirit and us who get speared, because spirit is what the Spirit does. And so being very clear about the consciousness that is flowing to and through us, who always are the vessels, the conduits, the points on the map of this place that is here, who are able to then give legs to that which wants to come through. Bobby?
Just to actually reinforce what you're saying, I see the web of weird as something, actually, I'll say to people, I'm a weirdo and I live in the weirdo world. I say that a lot. And then my husband told me about the Web of Weird because he is a student of Norse mythology. And to me, the Web of Weird is actually where people from the other side come so that I can communicate with them to other people. So just a reinforcement of what you're saying within, because we all channel the information differently and it goes through each of us differently. So I would say that that reinforces what you're saying, but just in the way that it pertains to what I do for people and why I am here. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yes. I'm sure I hear you. And obviously each of us are different and each of us have different energies within us that also impact our ability. And it's all about perspectivism in the scheme of things.
Yes, because I see it in a certain kind of way because of the way that it needs to be processed through my mind so that I can understand what my mind is able to do. Because I've never been locked up, but I don't like to walk into hospitals for fear they will find out that I'm in there and lock me up. So I say to my clients every day, thank God you come and sit down. Otherwise, I would think I was insane. So because of everything that I hear all the time. So yes, I would reinforce that for you in my own way because I not dumb it down, but I like to give it to you like I'm five. So because well, like yeah. Anyway, so
I like that you've used Bobby terms.
I
Is
use
the way
Bobby.
you've expressed
Yes.
it to me before.
Yes,
So
Bobbyisms.
yeah, there you go. Bobbyisms. That's it.
Yeah,
Literally,
Bobbyisms.
that's
Yeah.
literally what we're dealing with. We're dealing with isms, and each of us have them.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Agreed completely. And the dead who come to speak through me to their loved ones know Bobbyisms. They're already aware of the certain things that they need to do visually and auditorily so that I understand what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Thank you. And Claudio just said, we all speak our own Babel, which is the Tower of Babel, and how then we babble on, and it's stay a baby long time in Babylon as well, because then we can be displaced in our story into being the minor, which is the debtor who has to pay because we're no longer on the crew side of the ship, but instead are moved to the passenger side. And this is actually where, if we understand, there is a Bill of Rights and there is a Charter of Rights. And the Charter of Rights applies to passengers, whereas the Bill of Rights applies to the crew. And I don't know who the first person principle, I don't know what doctrine they are subject to, but the doctrine of discovery is significant in that too, which I will bring to you next week. But I see that we do just only have 2 minutes left, and without further ado, I will throw it back to you, Rena, and if then anyone has any other questions before we end.
We can go a little bit over time if everybody's agreeable. And are you at the end of part one?
Not entirely, but I also didn't have a need specifically to finish it all, other than to say that what Bobby shared is really key here, because why I share what I do, even though it may sound crazy when not put into its proper order and sequence, is because what we need to know how to do is actually use our pen to hold our position so the impositions cannot be put on my position. Claudio says, the ship, the passengers, and the crew, you are the sea that steers them all to. As the seamen that actually come into the church through the 2 pillars, that is what was being shared on the story. Earlier today, I was listening to through Gemstone University. So I'm going to put that into the, I'm going to put that into
the chat
group so that you can access that. And I will find the video as well that I had promised of Bobby and I. Oh, Bobby sent it to me. Perfect.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Bobby.
So
All right.
you'll put those things in the chat. So I just want to remind everybody that you be welcome to come again next week and hear part two. Laura, you're absolutely amazing. And what a great presentation. And this presentation will be also on our newsletter that goes out every week. The previous presentation Zoom link that you can watch at your leisure for each previous meeting is in the newsletter, plus information on the upcoming newsletter. I mean, upcoming meeting and Zoom link, as well as a lot of other things. Please join Freedom Lovers Canada. Go to the website, and that way you'll be receiving the newsletter and getting the invitation for every meeting. And thank you all for participating. And I'll just let Laura make her closing comments and wish you all a good night and end the meeting. Go ahead, Laura.
Amazing. Thank you, Rena, for having me and giving me the opportunity to share with those who might not have found me or the information that I have been sharing tonight and will share again next week. And where the word information is concerned, I do want to just pose that when I was in my escalated, elevated state of awareness, expanded awareness, I thought that I had keys that others needed, and I saw my spot on the map light up as this huge white light, and I saw or I heard or I knew whoever observes this place said, holy shit, who just woke up? And it was like, hi, it's me. And I felt really self-important in that experience. And I share it not because I want to make myself seem any more important than I am, because I believe that we're all super important. But I share it because from a context perspective, I was on my way back from Toronto after flying back from Arizona, where, like I said, there was a CIA FBI agent conference happening at the Hilton Embassy Suites where I was. And staying in the pattern of that, I tried to call the embassy in order to get protection because of that experience of seeing that I had become a threat to the matrix that matrix you if you're not paying attention. And I realized, or I found actually through firsthand experience, that your whole country is supposed to be safe. So you can't actually get to the embassy or help from the embassy if you're in your own country. Just FYI, don't try that, because they'll say that you have to call 911, which I did, and then I got locked up through them. All of that is to say that I was making lots of calls on my way back from Toronto home, while before I called 911 because a friend gave me the number for the embassy and I tried them, and then I found out about the 911. But all of this sounds ridiculous. So, like, did I deserve to get locked up? You know, it's pretty out of here. But at the same time, I was calling all these people and trying to give them pieces of the puzzle because I thought it was about information. And why I'm sharing this the way that I am is because what I realized from that experience is that it is us who need to get into formation. That's when information, which is light, actually helps to right the wrongs that I had tuned into energetically and I didn't understand what I was tuning into. So if this glorious amount of information tonight hasn't overwhelmed you, I hope that you're able to let some of it sink in and also let go what goes over your head or doesn't resonate with your heart, because the most important thing is for us to be able to connect. And when we make judgments about one another, then we stop the ability to actually connect, and we can't get into formation, because then we start making judgments about the ones that we're in formation with. So if that's useful at all to you as a closing sentiment, I simply wish to say thank you again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much for all the information you've shared with us, and we're looking forward to your part 2 next week. And thank you everyone for participating, and see you next week. And please share the invitation and invite all your friends and relatives to the next meeting. God bless you and have a good week. See you next week.
Thank you, Rena.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Rena. Thanks, Laura.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Laura.